There we go. Oh, I'm even on. All right. Welcome, everybody. Glad you braved the cold weather to be here today. We're going to be continuing on with Isaiah, going through these 7 chapters here, called the sixfold woe, the 6 woes, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of woe, okay? You see the list there of the ones that he goes through using the biblical language, okay? Now, obviously, he's not after Ariel, the Little Mermaid, or anything like that, but these are the metaphors and the descriptions that are used in the scriptures themselves. So let's go ahead and kick this off. All right, open Isaiah chapter 28, and you see the first woe right there. Woe to the proud crown, or sometimes described as the wealth or the pride, depending on your translation, of the drunkards at Ephraim, and to the fading flower of its glorious beauty, which is at the head of the fertile valley of those who are overcome with wine. Now, the problem you have here is which of the 2 nations, the divided country of Israel, which of the 2 is Ephraim? Israel or Judah? It's not Judah. Judah was comprised of Judah and Benjamin, the 2 tribes. Because remember, when they split, 10 went north and 2 went south. And so Ephraim came to dominate the population, so to speak, of the northern country of Israel. Now, if you remember your geography correctly, you have the Fertile Crescent, kind of going like this. And if this is the Mediterranean over here and Israel's right here, you've got Judah in the south, Israel in the north, and the Fertile Crescent came around this way. So Assyria attacking is going to be moving from north to south, right? And so the head of the Fertile Valley, being Israel itself, the Jordan Valley, all that kind of stuff, we see this, God's just describing, look, I'm sending enemies to you from the north. So you're at the head of this, because if you're standing up straight, the head's up here. They're going to strike you first because you're a bunch of drunkards. And notice this predominant sin. He doesn't say, well, you're just sinful in general. I mean, that's true, but he points out this one specifically. It's very similar to what Sodom and Gomorrah had, right? I mean, the term is sodomite. It's known for homosexuality. That's where that term comes from. And so Ephraim is being called out for its drunkenness and debauchery, specifically in much the same way that Sodom was called out for its homosexuality. And notice that, think back to the visitation of the angel of the Lord, the Lord himself, along with the other angels. When they visited Abraham, they said, the sin of Sodom has gone up so high, we can't stand it anymore. And you'll have these, I hesitate to call them churches, but you'll have these modern churches, such as the Episcopals and the Presbyterians, and now the Methodists even. Oh, well, he wasn't there to punish them for homosexuality. He was there to punish them for the laws they broke of hospitality. Because when the men of Sodom came and banged on the door of Lot, demanding for the angels to be brought out so they could have sex with them, it was really about violating the laws of hospitality. Well, there's a big problem with that. Number one, the Bible specifically condemns homosexuality repeatedly in both the Old and New Testament. But number 2 is that when God shows up to Abraham, he says, look, we're here to destroy these cities. It's not we're going to think about it and maybe something will happen that might cause us to destroy. We're here to do it. It's over. We've decided to destroy these cities. It's not maybe we're going to think about it. And so it's the same case with Ephraim. We've decided. It's done. Some of the terms that he uses later, it's devoted to destruction, which is just horrible. But that's saying, I've put a target on your head, and I don't miss, okay? So this is how bad Ephraim has got Israel as a whole, and this drunkenness has become a big problem for them. In verse 28:5, it says, the Lord is going to replace this crown of Ephraim. Because it's been the liquor, it's been the bottle up until this point. The Lord is going to come back and take predominance. Because what is this drunkenness? What is the sin that is being accomplished here? I mean, yeah, God says don't get drunk, but always be of sober mind, etc., etc. But what is the sin of prioritizing wine over the Lord himself? It boils down to idolatry. Because it doesn't have to be, you don't have to, oh, holy Kleenex box, I bow down to you and praise be to you. It doesn't have to be like that to be idolatry. Anything we prioritize above the Lord is an idol. That's idolatry in and of itself. Okay? So you don't have to carve out your images and pray to Buddha and rub his belly and all that kind of stuff. That is a means of doing it, to be sure. But anything that we prioritize over the Lord himself, well, I'm just had so much stress. I don't have time to pray today. I'm just going to hit the bottle. Or, I don't have time to meditate today. I've got to get to work. Well, that shows where your priorities are. The way what you do shows us our priorities, right? And don't get me wrong. I'm not, you bad people. I'm preaching to the choir here, okay? Preaching to the preacher, all right? This is something we have to do. And you see the converse of this in people like Daniel. We've made a law. Nobody can pray to any man or God except for the emperor of the Medo-Persian Empire for 30 days. Daniel says, that's nice. I got to go pray. That's his prioritization. So Ephraim has lost this. They've hit the bottle. They've turned away from God. And those also reel with wine and stagger from strong drink. The priest and the prophet reel. Now, what does it talk about to reel? What does that mean? What do you do if you're reeling from strong drink? Well, you're wobbly. Yeah. You're not walking in a straight line. Hey, everybody. Okay. When I was in Korea, I was the only one who didn't drink. And I became the de facto drunk herder. Okay. I mean, you think herding sheep is hard. You try a drunk. A group of them. And, a bunch of my friends would go out and just get plastered. And yeah, they couldn't walk in a straight line. And I'm having to stand behind this group and wrangle in the stragglers because we had a curfew. We were up near the DMZ and all that kind of, we won't get into that. But we had a curfew every night. If you didn't make it back on curfew, you're in trouble. So I had to get all my friends herded back through the city to get them back on post in time so that they wouldn't get busted. I was a drunk herder. That's what these guys are doing. They're reeling from the strong drink. Okay, they're reeling from the wine. They reel when they have visions. They totter when rendering judgment. If a judge shows up drunk to his court, is he going to stay a judge long? Do you really want this? If you can smell the booze on him from the witness stand, do you really want him judging your case? No. It's a horrible decision. The reason we don't let judges show up drunk to duty is because they make bad judgments. And that's what he's saying is going on here. Your prophets, I'm giving them the visions, but they're too drunk. They have their own visions, and it's from the booze. It's not from me. So it's this separation that has even hit the priests and the prophets, just to show, the language here is just to show how far removed Israel has gotten from the Lord, what they have prioritized instead. Now this verse, you'll see it shows up in two different verses, verses 10 and 13. Order on order, sometimes translated precept, precept. Order on order, line on line, a little here, a little there. Well, what on earth does that mean? This was everybody else mocking Isaiah. Oh, yeah, you just say, do it this way, a little here, a little there, and we'll all be fine. They were mocking the simplistic nature of his message. Okay, he's telling them, look, you guys have turned away, just come back to God, and everything will be fine. Okay, Isaiah, whatever. You crazy Isaiah guy. Here, have a drink, and just shut up. Okay? They're making fun of this guy. And the mockery of that comes in this verse. That's what the other priests and prophets are saying to Isaiah. And you look in verse 13 there, as it continues on, that they order on order, a little here, a little there, that they may go and stumble backward, be broken, snared, and taken captive. This is what God is going to make happen. You don't believe my message? Okay, then I will show you. You haven't listened to the words of my prophet? Then I will demonstrate this in your own life. What I have said, I will make a reality, because you haven't repented. You don't learn from me talking to you, then you'll learn another way. Okay? Think about, for those of us, who've had kids, you tell them, no, little Johnny, don't do that. Okay? Little Ryan, okay? When I was young, my grandparents lived outside of Tucson, Arizona, and they lived out in the middle of the desert, and every afternoon when we would go visit them, we'd go walking through the desert. Loved it. I'm a desert rat, loved it. It was paradise. And my grandmother told little Ryan about the cholla cactus. It's the jumping cactus. It'll jump out and get you. And I'm looking at Grandma like, whatever, Grandma. You know, little guy, I'm looking at her sideways. I didn't believe it. So we went on our regular afternoon walk. Oh, there's a cholla cactus. Be careful. It's the jumping cactus. And she kept on walking, her and my sister. And I kind of stood there, and I'm going to show this cactus. And so I kicked the cactus and got a leg full of cactus spikes, right? I didn't listen. I had to learn the hard way. And so little Ryan, crying all the way home and getting all those cactus spines pulled out of my leg. Sometimes people don't listen. They're not listening. So God says, fine, you don't want to listen to me? You'll listen to the Assyrians. And they'll be much less compromising, much less nice than I am. 28:14, so the message here has switched over to Judah now. God's been like, all right, I've been talking about the Israelites. You guys know how bad they've been. Ever since the split, when Jeroboam set up the two calves, one at Dan and one at Beersheba, to bookend, sort of, the country, so the Israelites didn't go down to Jerusalem to worship God anymore. He said, look, that cow over there, that's your new God. That's now Yahweh in place of him. Go worship that. And I put one at both ends just to make it more convenient for you so you don't actually go down to Jerusalem and realize that you have kindred with the Judeans and maybe reestablish some sort of single country. Okay, that was part of his political moves. Just like Joel talked about last week with Nimrod setting up or establishing the foundations of Baal worship, making himself to be a god for political reasons. That's what Jeroboam did as well with the two calves. But now the Lord switches over the message from Israel, given it as an example. You got all those drunks up north, look what's going to happen to them. But now, if you guys don't change, it's going to happen to you too. Okay? And read verse 15 there. Because you have said, we have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we have made a pact. The overwhelming scourge will not reach us when it passes by, for we have made falsehood our refuge, and we have concealed ourselves with deception. This is what the Judeans are saying, okay? We don't need you, God. We've made a pact with death, with Sheol itself, the underworld. Well, that's a deal with the devil, because it's either God or it's not, right? And if it's not God, it comes from the devil. And that's all there is to it. And so this is what they're saying to God. We don't need you anymore. We've taken care of it ourselves. We are superior. We are independent of you. We no longer need you. We, in our pride and our arrogance, have raised ourselves to be, we don't need God anymore. That's, again, the sin. You see the sin of Satan. You see the sin of the Tower of Babel, which also Nimrod. And now you see the sin here. It's all the same thing. It's this pride of, I don't need God. I want to be free from the restrictions that God puts upon me. I don't like his rules. I want my own rules. I want to be my own God. That's what got Satan kicked out of heaven. That's what inspired the building of the Tower of Babel. Let's make our own mountain. We can climb up to heaven and we'll be God too. And that's the same thing happening here. We've made a death. We don't need you anymore, God. We've got it taken care of. And this is the fallacy that they're going into. Verse 16 is the first mention of the cornerstone Messiah. You know, I have put this, you hear that referenced in the New Testament. You know, Jesus was made the cornerstone, the chief stone, the chief cornerstone. He's the stumbling block that all the Judeans and the Israelites and especially the Pharisees continue to stumble over, because he was problematic in reconciling what God had in plan for the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, versus what the Pharisees and all the Israelites believed about the political kingdom of God that they expected. And so this is the first mention of that. And then go to 18 and 19. Your covenant with death will be canceled. And your pact with Sheol will not stand. When the overwhelming scourge passes through, then you become its trampling place. As often as it passes through, it will seize you. From morning after morning, it will pass through any time during the day or night. And it will be sheer terror to understand what it means. Think about God saying that to you. Oh my goodness. He's saying this is going to be the worst thing you have ever imagined. This is going to be sheer terror. I don't know if anybody has ever been in a life-threatening situation where you were scared for your life, for your limb. That's what he's telling them. This is going to be the worst thing. This is going to be the most atrocious thing that's ever happened to you in your life. And that verse gets me, those two. All right, 28:21, he references these two different places. Perazim and Gibeon. Okay, going back old school stuff here. Perazim, found there in 2 Samuel, David's first battle against the Philistines, and he picks this example specifically because David inquired of God first. He says, look, I got to go to the priest, I got to find out, Lord, should I go up against the Philistines or hold back? Why does God want this one specifically noted? What have we been talking about? The separation of the people from the Lord, right? They're trying to have this independence. We don't need you, God. We made a pact with death. We made a pact with Sheol. We don't need you. We don't need to inquire of you. We don't need your permission to go fight Philistines. We don't need your permission to do anything. It's this arrogance that comes from having an intelligent mind. David himself, he goes to the priest, he inquires, God says, yes, go up against them because I've given them into your hand. Now notice, that's a two-part statement there. Yes, go against them, I have given them into your hand. Because there are times when God says, yeah, sure, go up against them, but I'm going to eat you alive with them. I'm going to tear you up with them. Think about the Israelites coming out of Egypt into the promised land, and they mess up at Ai or Ai, however you want to pronounce it. And God says, all right, you need to go out against them, have no fear. They screwed up, they get, or no, I'm messing up the story. But anyway, they disobeyed God and they got beaten very badly. And then they decided, well, now we'll do it the right way. And God says, don't do it, I'm not with you. And they still went out and they got beaten again. It was a horrible thing, but this is why God points out this specific example. David inquired of me. He asked permission first, and then I helped him out. Gibeon and Joshua, the Lord killing more Gibeonites with hail. You guys remember this story? This again was the conquest of the land, and Joshua's leading the troops, and they're out there fighting and everything, but God says, I'm going to be with you. And he sends a hailstorm and targets the enemy. Now, I'll tell you, that's something very special, because a lot of times, if you have close quarters combat, and you've got bad guys here and good guys here, but we're mixed up in the middle, it's very tough to target just the bad guys. I can tell you this from experience. I used to do targeting, and it's very difficult to do that. If you start bombing them in close proximity, you're probably going to kill a few of your own. And there's been more than one occasion. A few years ago, some Green Berets died because of friendly fire that was too close. It was off-grid. Somebody messed up on where to locate it. God is targeting them while they're in the middle of hand-to-hand combat. This is not me shooting you from 100 yards away. This is up close, arm's reach. And God is targeting them specifically and killing them with hailstones. And it says he killed more of them than the Israelites did. Now that's some effective artillery fire right there. So these are given, again, to designate, look at the power of God. Look at how you're supposed to be responding to him. Inquire of him, and he can do more than you ever can. The reason God puts these examples in there, he doesn't just say, yeah, I'm the best. He says, remember Perazim, remember Gibeon, look what I did there. And these would have been very obvious examples because these people knew their history. You know, it's part of their tradition. Just like, this is like us saying, well, remember what George Washington did. It's similar as that. All right, let's read 23 and following, because this has it seems a little bizarre at first. Give ear and hear my voice, listen and hear my words. Does the farmer plow continually to plant seed? Does he continually turn and harrow the ground? Does he not level its surface and sow dill and scatter cumin? And plant wheat in rows, barley in its place, and rye within its areas? For his God instructs and teaches him properly. For dill is not threshed with a threshing sledge, nor is the cartwheel driven over cumin. But dill is beaten out with a rod and cumin with a club. Grain for bread is crushed. Indeed, he does not continue to thresh it forever. Because the wheels of his cart and his horses eventually damage it, he does not thresh it longer. This also comes from the Lord of hosts, who has made his counsel wonderful and his wisdom great. Now, what in the world does farmers and crops and implements of farming have to do with Judah's relationship to God? Who cares if a farmer plows now or plows all the time? What does this have to do with Scripture? Well, we know it's important because all Scripture is important. It's all God-breathed and useful for instruction. So what's the lesson here? Why do we care if the farmer plows all the time and what he uses to thresh the grain and what crops he plants? Because there is a time for things. There's a way to do things. You don't just go out and do whatever you want anytime. And it says, God instructs them. He's, look, I have given you the knowledge. I have given you the instruction. If you're not going to be stupid when you're farming, don't be stupid with me. There's a way to handle things. Come to me, like David did at Perazim, learn what I have to say, get my permission, I'll show you how to do it right. You'll be like a farmer that I instruct. He says, I'm giving this all to you. It's like us today. We have no excuse. It's an open book test, folks. We have the manual of life. What do I do in this? Well, read it. Look it up. You can find the answer. He's literally given us the book to read and find out how to live life so that we enjoy it the best and we do the most good. Okay. That's all class. Have a nice day. No. Okay. It's just a matter of reading into this and finding out what's going on. Same thing that he's saying here. I've given you the instruction on this. I've even got my guy Isaiah talking to you right now. Literally talking to you. But you don't listen. And so here's the problems. All right. Let's carry on. Chapter 29. Woe, O Ariel, or Ariel, the city where David once camped, and year to year observe your feasts on schedule. I will bring distress to Ariel, and she will be a city of lamenting and mourning. The word Ariel, don't think Little Mermaid, is Lion of God. Okay, this would have been a boy's name in the original. Right now it's Little Mermaid, but we do what we do. What is Ariel? Somebody find Ariel on the map. What are we talking about? Jerusalem, yeah. The city of David. Okay, so understand, there's Jerusalem, and then there's the city of David. If you go back and read through the conquest of the Holy Land originally, they couldn't kick, I believe it was the Jebusites, out of a particular stronghold within the confines of Jerusalem itself. And so that remained a little enclave of foreign population within the larger city of Jerusalem. Until David came along and he said, get out of my house, you stinking Jebusites. And he took the citadel, conquered it, and that became the city of David. Okay? In this case, it's being called Ariel, Zion, the mountain of God. Now, anybody who's ever been to Israel says, well, it's not actually that big of a mountain. It's more like the hill of God. But that's what they termed it at the time. Okay? This was important because it was that last little stronghold in Jerusalem. Yeah, we own all this turf, but those stinking Jebusites are always there just, thumbing their noses at us. Until David comes along and says, we're not going to do this anymore. I'm the man after God's own heart. I'm a big, tushy-kicking warrior. I'm going to get in here and we're going to take this. And he did. And so that became the city of David. Much like the city of London, financial district within the greater London. Okay? So this is just a special enclave. But he's talking about Jerusalem as a whole in this. And he brings in the idea of this siege. If you read in those first few verses there, verse 3, I will camp against you, encircling you. I will set siege works against you. I will raise up battle towers against you. Then you will be brought low, etc., etc. So he's talking about the siege. Now this makes us think of the 4 horsemen. Okay? Everybody remember the 4 horsemen. I looked and he opened the first seal. The first living creature said, come. I looked and behold a white horse. And on it was a rider mounted in white. He had a crown and he had a bow and arrow. And the Lord said, go out and conquer. And the second seal was broken. And the second living creature said, come. And I looked and there was a red horse. And its rider was given a huge sword. And he said, go forth and make war. And the third seal was broken. I looked, and the third living creature said, come. And I looked, and there was this black horse. And his rider had a pair of scales. And he was told, a quart of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 quarts of barley for the day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine. Again, we're back to these agricultural references. A quart of wheat would have been enough to feed 1 person. So you work for a day, you get to eat for a day. That's what he's saying. But 3 quarts of barley, well, barley was less nutritious, but you got more volume. So you could feed, a wife and 1 of your kids, and then the rest of you are out of luck. So these are the stages of a siege. Okay, and finally the 4th seal, 4th living creature said, come, and a pale horse, and his rider was death, and Hades followed behind him, and they were giving power to kill a quarter of the earth with beasts and sword and pestilence and famine. This is a description of what happened during a siege. Conqueror moves out, in this case the Assyrians, and they make war. And they're going to make war across all the open terrain. Then they come to this walled city, like Jerusalem. Now they have to lay in a siege. Well, the siege was not a quick thing. It wasn't, we're here today and gone tomorrow. A siege was, we're going to camp out and we're going to surround you. Nobody's getting in or out, including no food and no water, unless you've got the water taken care of, which Jerusalem did. There's no food getting in and out. Eventually you're going to start starving. And you see examples of this. The story of the 2 ladies, and they boil one son, and they eat him, and then the next day they go to boil and eat the next one, and she hides him, and the lady's upset, you killed my son, and we ate him, and now we're not eating your son. You have these examples constantly. And God's just pointing out what they already know. Look, when I send the Assyrians, they're going to surround you. You're not going anywhere. And you're going to starve. And that's when death comes in, okay? And look at the language. You'll be brought low. From the earth you will speak. Well, why from the earth? Because you're a corpse. You're dead on the ground. So you're speaking from the ground. You're not going to stand up again and start talking. You're dead and gone. From the dust where you are prostrate, you're laid face down, your words will come, like that of a spirit, i.e. a ghost, whispers from the dust. This is what your voice will be. You're dead, you're a corpse. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Please stop what you're doing, come back to me. Because now, this is what waits for you. All right? Very depressing. But it's meant to be. It's meant to scare these people into some sort of repentance. The enemies of Judah. Okay, so after the conquest, God turns around and says, but after all that, once I've killed all you evildoers and the remnant that remains returns to me, which he has pointed out repeatedly, then your enemies will become like fine dust. Think like powdered sugar where you smack it and it just puffs up into the air and disappears. That's what he's talking about. Dreams that are not remembered. My wife, Teresa, she talks in her sleep, She's like, I got to buy that Rangers hat. Okay, baby. And she wakes up the next morning, I didn't say that. I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't have any dreams like that. That's what these people will be, these enemies, these Assyrians, okay? Let's read 9 through 12. Be delayed and wait, blind yourselves and be blind. They become drunk but not with wine, they stagger but not with strong drink. For the Lord has poured over you a spirit of deep sleep. He has shut your eyes, the prophets, and he has covered your heads, the seers. The entire vision will be to you like the words of a sealed book, which when they give it to one who is literate, saying, please read this, he will say, I cannot, for it is sealed. Then the book will be given to the one who's illiterate, and saying, please read this, and he will say, I can't read. Okay? God says, you guys have gotten drunk. Ephraim got drunk. With you, it's not going to be that. I'm going to put this out on you. You're not going to be able to think straight. You're going to be confused. It'll be like you're drunk, okay? Because I'm going to punish you. What is the message earlier in Isaiah? Be ever seeing, but not observing. Be ever hearing, but not listening, right? Jesus himself quotes that passage. You guys are just like you were in Isaiah's day. I tell you this stuff, but you don't listen. I show you these miracles, you don't believe. You see what's going on, but you're not understanding it. And this is what Isaiah is talking about here. It's the same thing. You guys are so stubborn, so set in your ways, you're not willing to turn despite all this evidence that I'm showing you. The words of the sealed book, again, we're getting into the apocryphal portions, all right? Daniel 12:4, Daniel is given this vision of Judgment Day. And look at all this stuff that's going to happen. But seal it up, he says. God tells him, seal it up. This is going to be saved for later on. Okay? And then we have in Revelation 5 and 6, when, God is sitting there on his throne, and we see the seraphim and the cherubim and the 24 elders and the river, and everything's great. And John's seeing this wonderful message, and God's got this book in his hands. And the book has 7 seals on his big old book. And it says, a strong angel cried out, who is worthy to take the book from the hand of God and open it? And it says it's a strong angel saying this, not just some puny little angel. This is a strong angel saying this. And John says, I began to weep because nobody could be found to take the book out of God's hand and open the seals. We're never going to know what's in this book. But then says, hey, stop crying. Look, it's the Lion of Judah sitting at the right hand of God. And John says, I looked, but there was this lamb, not a lion. He said, the Lion of Judah, but there's this lamb. But the lamb, and it looked like it had already been slain, but it was still alive. And then it goes up and it takes the book out of God's hands. And note the language there. It takes the book. God doesn't give it to him. He takes this thing out of God's hands, showing that equality. And he starts popping the seals. That's when we get the 4 horsemen and et cetera, et cetera. But it's this imagery of this sealed book. And Daniel wasn't allowed to write his stuff down and then finally Revelation, and it's popped open. And God's saying, this is what it's going to be like. I can give you the book. Oh, I can't open it. It's sealed. Well, give it to this other guy. I can't read. So it's completely useless. Holy cow, I am way behind schedule. In 29:13, it says, you worship me with tradition learned by rote. And you give me this lip service, but your hearts are far from me. And I find that happens to us again here today, Just show up to church and do what you're supposed to do. Okay, second woe. Woe to those who hide their plans from the Lord. And this is, again, he's like, do you think you're going to hide things from me? Do you think that you, being the clay, are equal to me, the potter? Who is made versus the maker? And these people say, he did not make me. He has no understanding. And this is kind of that atheistic argument. Well, I don't have to obey God because there isn't actually a God. He didn't make me. There's no one that made me. I'm just a fluke that came out of nothing somehow. It takes more faith to be an atheist than a Christian nowadays. It's ridiculous. 29:17 and following, we see mirrored with what Jesus told John. The deaf hear, the blind see, the afflicted are glad, the needy rejoice, and the evildoers are ended. Oh, I didn't include that slide. But this is something that Jesus quotes to John. Remember, John was in prison, and one of John's apostles went to Jesus and said, are you the one we've been waiting for? John wants to know. And Jesus said, all right, relax. Go tell him the deaf hear, the blind see, the afflicted are glad, the needy rejoice. The kingdom of heaven is here. It's a reference. John would go, oh, that's my Isaiah. I remember going to Isaiah class. I remember that now. Jesus is saying he's the guy. Good. He read from the passage when he first stood up in the temple. He said, here's what happens. You guys have just seen this fulfilled in your hearing. Hooray for me. Okay. Woe to the rebellious children who execute a plan but not mine, who should make an alliance of my spirit, but they're going down to Egypt. This again is that physical versus spiritual. okay? We look at the power of, where do I have it? Oh, I don't have it in there. You look at the power of angels. The Passover angel, who specifically targeted the firstborn of every Egyptian in one night. The Assyrian angel, another problem with Assyria, and they're all freaking out and they pray to God. The angel goes through, kills 185,000 Assyrians in one night. That is effective combat. I've never killed 185,000 people in one night. We killed a lot of people. We never hit that number. That's effective combat, okay? And God's saying, look, I am God. My angels can take care of this little stuff. I'm God. If you guys just rely on me, I'll take care of it. You think Egypt's going to help you out with the chariots and the horses? They can't help you out. But if you'll just call to me, I can take care of it. And he's trying to get them, again, just to turn back to him, as he always does. 30:10, the people tell him, all right, you guys quit seeing your visions, you prophets of God. Don't prophesy what is right. Talk to us the pleasant words. Prophesy illusions that make us feel better. It's like Ahab. When he and Jehoshaphat, they got together and they were going to fight Aram, I believe. And Jehoshaphat, who was kind of a holy Judean king, he says, well, let's inquire of prophets first. And so Ahab brings his prophets, but they're a bunch of pagans. Even the ones who claim they were for Yahweh weren't really. And they'll say, oh yeah, go up, have a good time, you're going to kill them all. And Jehoshaphat says, well, isn't there somebody from the temple who we can talk to? Oh, I got this guy, Micaiah, but all he ever says is bad stuff to me. I hate that guy. Okay, Micah, what do you have to say? And he says, yeah, sure, go up. Don't lie to me. You're going to get killed, Ahab. Enjoy your last day on earth. It's over for you. And see, I told you, Jehoshaphat, that's all he ever says is bad stuff to me. But that's exactly what happened. And so they're not wanting to hear all the good stuff. They don't want to hear from Micaiah in this case with Ahab. It's like, please stop talking about God. Can't we just have fun with these other cults and false deities? They're a lot more entertaining on Sunday, or Saturday back in this case. Man, I'm out of time. It goes through how all things get better with God when he shows up. And then this one, Topheth. If you read that verse 33, it talks specifically about Topheth. And again, God doesn't just put this stuff in there, oh, well, just pick something and let's go with that. Topheth was an important, or this analogy of Topheth is important because it was a valley where they had a lot of Molech sacrifice. That depiction there is of a sacrifice of children to Molech. And Molech's altar there was made of bronze or brass, some kind of metal. And it was heated from a fire that was in his lap or at his feet. But the important thing is that it was heated. And so this pagan priest, he would take this baby about to be sacrificed, and he would put it in the outstretched hands, the bronze hands of Molech. Well, those bronze hands conduct heat. And it's hot. But you can see how they're slightly tilted. They're angled. They will lay the baby in this, and the baby naturally, from the pain of the heat, would roll. Well, there's only one way to roll because it's tilted. And so it would roll out of the frying pan, literally into the fire. How many kids died this way? This is what happens when we turn away from God. This is the extent of evil that can happen. And for them, oh, well, look, the baby wanted to go to Molech because it rolled into the fire. No. Don't try to pass that off to us. You're killing kids. I'm sorry, I get choked up on kids. Okay. Woe those who go down to Egypt, again talking about this reliance upon everyone except for God. Yeah, that's where I was talking about, the power of spirits, of the angels, okay? And remember, we've got at least 4 different classifications of angels, okay? Now, the Catholics, they divide into powers and rulers and authorities and principalities, all that. I get that. And we know that countries have princes over them that are demons inspiring the leadership to be evil, and it gets down to state, all levels of government, okay? But you have at least four. You have your regular angels, your malaks, okay? You have your archangel, Michael. You have the seraphim, the fiery serpents described in Isaiah chapter 6 that fly above God's head. And you have the cherubim, the four living creatures, the ones that Ezekiel saw, all that kind of stuff, the weird ones that have the four heads and the 6 pairs of wings and bronze feet, and they shine like, or not bronze feet, calves' feet, and they shine like bronze. You have all these different ones, and the capabilities that they have are described at various points throughout Scripture. Okay, you got Gabriel showing up, everybody just calm down, I'm just here to tell you about a baby, type thing. And then, hey, everybody, Jesus has been born, let's all go visit him. Then you have Michael leading the angels in warfare in heaven, defeating Satan and his angels. You have the cherubim kicking Adam and Eve out of the garden and guarding the place so they couldn't come back. And you'll notice with the cherubim specifically, wherever God is coming down or there's a connection point between the physical and the spiritual realm, that's where the cherubim are seen. You see that in the Garden of Eden. They block the entrance of Eden so that the man can't get back in, because now they're separated from God. You don't get to be in my paradise anymore. You have to approach, and these guard the path to me. Then you have the temple, right? And the holy place and the Holy of Holies, cherubim all over the place in the artwork and everything. And then on the ark itself, you had 2 cherubim covering with their wings like this, the Ark of the Covenant, and then 2 more, because there's 4 of them, 2 more huge statues, and their wings went across the entire room. They would kind of stick out like this, and one's in the corner, and the other one's touching the other cherubim, and then cherubim, and back to the corner. And there's always 4 because there are 4. And we note that the Satan himself was a cherubim. Now, was he number 5, or God got rid of him and promoted somebody else? We don't know. But this is the level, this is the power that these guys have. But they're still not God. And when they show up and people are like, oh my goodness, let me bow down. He's like, no, don't do that. You're going to get me in trouble with the big guy. Yes, I can kill 185,000 of you in one night, but I still answer to him, just like you do. So get up. There's not going to be any of this angel worship stuff. Okay? Ladies, you get talked about in verses 9 through 14 of chapter 32. Don't get lazy, don't be vain, all that kind of stuff. The Spirit getting poured out, that's a wonderful passage. Read that one. And finally, we get to, woe to Assyria. Well, isn't Assyria being used? They're an instrument of God right now. Sennacherib him says, he shows up at the walls and he says, look, didn't your God send me? He knows that he's been sent. All right? God talked to Cyrus, he talked to Sennacherib. He can give messages to whoever he wants. Doesn't have to be the Jews. He says, look, your God sent me. You better just surrender now. Make this easy on yourself, Hezekiah. And he speaks in Egypt, or Israelite, Hebrew. That's the language I'm looking for. But notice this. Isaiah predicts the downfall before it's ever even happened. Assyria wasn't destroyed for another century. Isaiah's talking about this in 701 BC. Assyria wasn't destroyed by Babylon until 609, about that time. And notice also the plans of God. Assyria beginning in the 2nd century BC, and it had, it would ebb and flow in its power, but it comes this 9th century when God needs them, says, let's kick that in. Let's make that happen. And that's when you see their big rise. And the 9th century was the peak of their power. This is the 8th century here. God starts kicking them in under Tiglath-Pileser, Sargon, Sennacherib, all those guys. And you see them show up throughout Scripture, those names in particular. He lets them lie in wait. You guys just hang out till I need you. And then he calls them in and use them, but then they go overboard because they're not godly people. You see the warnings of Jonah. You see the book of Nahum talking about Assyria, how bad they were. And God says, look, you're going to come in and be my instrument. You're going to destroy and punish my own people. but you're going to take it too far. And I don't like the fact of what you did to my people. Yes, I wanted you to punish them, but you guys went crazy. And now I'm upset with you. So I'm going to destroy you, O destroyer. Wrath against the nations, there's that passage of devoted to destruction. And God calls out that Bozrah in Edom at this time, which is modern day Jordan pretty much, will be a sacrifice. I'm going to take care of you guys. Remember, the Edomites were cousins of the Israelites. In chapter 35, when God saves you, there's more of this: the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame walk, the mute speak, etc., etc. And it talks about streams in the Arabah. Now, the word there, Arab, that's what we're talking about. It's the Negev, the desert portion south of the Fertile Crescent. If this is the Fertile Crescent, you got Iraq over here and Israel over here. It's this piece. Now, to me, that is home sweet home right there. I love a desert. I was raised in the desert. Love it. Didn't even mind Iraq so much except for getting shot at. But for you guys, from you Tennesseans with all your trees and your water, that's a lousy place to be. And don't get me wrong, if you don't have a good source of water, yeah, that's just death waiting to happen. But he's talking about, look, I'm going to turn it into a nice place again. You know, think about Eden. You had 4 rivers flowing out of that thing. It was this oasis in the middle of the plains of Shinar, this desert area. But I gave you an oasis. That's what I'm going to do again. If you guys would just come back. Just come back. Stop all this foolishness that you're doing. I've told you how to make it happen. Just do it. And that holds very true for us today as well. We can sit here and we can go through the rituals of church, you know, because it does become a ritual. Well, we can't have communion after the sermon, right? We have to have all our songs and prayers in this order. It becomes a ritual, and that's done out of convenience and habit. We're creatures of habit. But it can't just be that. And so if we just return to God, come to God and say, Lord, help us out. This is what he promises. I'm over time. I appreciate y'all's patience. We'll see you next week.